Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. Hey, everybody. You ready to get into part 2?
So ready, and this one is bad.
Okay, Trace, you going to give everyone a warning?
I've got a big old warning here. So if you haven't listened to part 1, go back to last week's episode, season 1, episode 8, part 1, the Rains brothers and Brent Koster, then come back to this one. Over the next couple of episodes, there will be some extremely triggering material involving kidnapping, rape, and murder. If this is too difficult for you to hear, please stop listening now. It's okay. We'll see you back on another Malice Monday. When I was doing my research for the show, I came upon some articles from the Kalamazoo Gazette regarding the crimes of Brent Koster. This is when I learned that he and Danny Rains had committed these crimes together. After reading a few articles and watching some old news clips, I somehow came across the full transcript for Brent Koster's public parole hearing held on September 10th, 2020.
Is it juicy?
Oh, it's juicy.
How juicy do we actually get? Let's see. What'd you find?
Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this is about to get pretty gritty. We will be reading verbatim from the public transcript, as I feel this is the most accurate description of the crimes committed by Danny Rains and Brent Koster. I have to tell you that as I read this transcript, there are many times that I felt a little sick to my stomach. Thankfully, I have never had a loved one murdered and had to be put through the hell of all that, especially knowing that you have to basically continue to fight to keep the murderer in prison for the rest of their lives by attending parole hearings every 5 years for the rest of your life as well. My heart is heavy when I think about what they must have gone through with this process. Not only did the perpetrator get a life sentence, but so does the family. What torture.
Yeah, it is actually insane when you look at it from that aspect, is the victim's family never get to rest. They always get to stay in that perpetual alertness, awakeness state of
hell.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It has to be horrible. I mean, it's horrible to lose a loved one, period. But then to lose them to murder and then have to constantly
relive it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's horrible. It's a horrible process. It just kills me. I've never heard a murderer describe their crimes before, and I have to tell you, it got me. I'm not just doing this for the shock factor of it all. I'm doing this because this is very real, and this man is out on parole, running his own transportation business. If Brent had not testified against Danny Rains, he would be spending the rest of his natural life in prison. Just like the episode with Catherine Wood and Gwendolyn Graham, they were both responsible. But because one cooperated and testified against the other, one got life and one got parole.
Insane.
Mm-hmm. It's bananas.
I don't know. Like, once we prove that people are guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, why do we do the life thing? Like, I get, a lot of people have issues with the death penalty, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I just can't get away from when they're this violent, when it's no holds bar, we have all the evidence against them, and they are copping to it themselves. Why can't we just be like, okay, we're done with you, and lights out?
Right. Why is parole even on the table?
Yeah.
Because the people you killed, they're dead forever.
Yeah. Again, we're going to get too far into the legalese of everything, and, neither one of us are lawyers. We're just nurses. I like to say that I'm just a nurse. I'm not a lawyer. However, I mean, common sense is kind of common sense. But then you always have the outliers. Like, if somebody accidentally murdered somebody, then it can't be the same. That's why we have these sentencing hearings in the first place, right? There's a statute that, 25 years to life, 10 years to life, all of those statutes that are there, right? Without getting too legalese on it. Why isn't there, like, when we have you dead to right, no pun intended, why? Why do we do parole? Why do we even let you out? Why do we even let you keep breathing? Like, when it's this egregious? I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself because it's about to get real bumpy, I'm sure. So before I even go too crazy on how these suckers should just die, I'll just shush.
Okay. All right. When a parole hearing is scheduled, right? What we were just talking about. The families of the victims are notified so they can represent their loved ones and fight to keep the perpetrator in prison where they belong. Sadly, there was no one present to speak for their loved ones during this public parole hearing. I came across an article where the sister of one of the women murdered by Brent Koster made a comment to a reporter that neither she nor her family were made aware of the public parole hearing. The only reason I can imagine that the families were not made aware is maybe an old address was on file. If you or anyone you know are the family of a murdered victim, please stay in touch with the parole board. Make sure that they have your current address each and every time you move. It's just not fair that their voices were not heard during the consideration of Brent's parole. Would it have made a difference? I don't know, but at least they would have had a voice on behalf of Claudia Bidstrup, Linda Clark, and Pamela Fearnow. As I already mentioned, this is the full public parole board transcript that we will be reading. There really is no other way for me to do this, as I want you to feel the impact as much as I did. I found the process intriguing, the details haunting, and crimes committed shocking. So with all that being said, let's get into it. In the matter of Brent Koster, number 142253, September 10th, 2020, transcript courtesy Network Reporting, statewide court reporters. For the people, Mr. Scott R. Rothermel, Assistant Attorney General, read by Tracy Preston. Michael Egan, the Chair for the Michigan Parole Board, read by Christine Mulligan. Also present, Sandra Gerard, read by Nina Mulligan. Jackie McKeenan, read by Regina Lindsay. Brent Koster, read by Todd Preston. Recorded by Kelly O'Donnell, Certified Electronic Recorder.
My name is Michael Egan. I am the chairperson for the Michigan Parole Board. We are in session to conduct a public hearing in the matter of Brent Koster, prisoner number 142253. I will be conducting this public hearing. Representing the Office of an Attorney General is Scott Rothmero. Sir, could you please identify your name and prison number for the record?
My name is Brent Koster, 142253.
Let the record reflect that the person before the parole board has identified himself as Brent Koster. The parole board may grant parole to a person serving a paroled life sentence, subject to following provisions and conditions. Condition number 1, that the statutory number of calendar years of such sentence has been served. 2, that the sentencing judge does not object. 3, that a public hearing be held. And 4, that a transcript of the public hearing is filed with the Attorney General. The records of parole board show that Brent Koster was sentenced by Honorable Patrick H. McCauley of the 9th Judicial Circuit Court in Kalamazoo County to a life sentence for the crime of murder in the second degree. Further, the parole board show that Brent Koster has served over 48 years of his sentence and is eligible for release consideration under the provisions of the Lifer Law. Mr. Rothmero, have you had an opportunity to study the affidavit and, in your opinion, would say the parole board has jurisdiction to proceed with this hearing?
Thank you. Prior to this hearing, I have reviewed the affidavit by Amy Moore, the public hearing coordinator for the Michigan Department of Corrections Parole Board. It is my opinion that the requirements of the statute have been complied with and there is jurisdiction for holding this hearing. I will note that there was an objection filed by the Kalamazoo County Prosecutor's Office, which is led by Prosecutor Jeffrey Getting. His office wrote a letter to the parole board dated August 3rd, 2020, stating that his office opposed parole, but there was no judicial letter, or objection filed. Thank you. I found a copy of this letter from Prosecutor Jeffrey Getting's office, and this is what it said. And the reason I'm reading it is because they did not follow having a judge submit the letter, but I think it's important that we read it. Dear parole members, we have been informed that inmate Brent Koster is being considered for parole. Please be advised that this office opposes any parole for him. In support of our position, please reread the Pre-Sentence Investigation Report, PSIR, sent to us as an attachment to your hearing notification letter of July 22nd, 2020. Mr. Koster's crimes were horrific and terrifying. His actions were that of a soulless, cold-blooded killer. We can only imagine the sheer terror his victims experienced as he toyed with them before killing them. What is also scary is the prospect of him being released back into society on parole. particularly when considering the sex offender risk assessment. The assessment notes the presence of multiple risk factors of either significant concern or some concern. A reasonable conclusion from the report is that recidivism is more likely than for those without the same risk factors. An increased risk of recidivism from someone like Brent Koster is an unacceptable risk to society. Thank you for your time and attention. Sincerely, Scott W. Brower, Chief Assistant Prosecuting Attorney.
First of all, Mr. Koster, will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Koster. What I want to do is explain to you how we're going to proceed today. First of all, this hearing is recorded. There's a court recorder that's online that is recording everything that's said. So it's very important that you answer verbally. Do you understand that?
Yes.
It's very important that you tell the truth in this matter, the complete truth, not to hold anything back. You need to fully explain everything. If you attempt to hide something or you minimize something, that could be taken in the wrong way by the parole board and could be detrimental to the parole decision. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
I want to explain the parole process for lifers. First of all, lifers are reviewed after their first 10 years in prison, and then they are filed, reviewed every 5 years after that. One of the parole board members was assigned to your case. They took an interest in you and interviewed you and produced a report as a result of that. Also, a psychological evaluation was ordered, and also a medical status report was ordered by the parole board. When all those were produced, that parole board member presented your case to the entire board. There are 10 parole board members. In order for the case to move to the next stage, a majority of the board has to support the public hearing. And in this case, there was enough support that we conduct a public hearing. What's going to happen after this is I'm going to prepare a report and we're going to get the transcript. When the parole board again meets in what we call executive session, then we'll discuss your case. We'll discuss the public hearing and the transcript, and then we'll make a decision as to whether to parole you or not. That requires a majority vote of the parole board. In other words, 6 or more board members. If it's a positive decision, we're going to set the conditions of your parole, and those conditions are going to include a term of parole that will be 48 months. There will be no early discharge for good behavior. You will have to comply with all of the conditions of the parole and that term of parole. What I tell you is that the board is actually meeting in executive session tomorrow. We will not have the report done, nor will we have a transcript for it tomorrow. So it will not be done once everything is complete and the board meets and you're on our docket. We'll take up this matter. Do you have any questions?
No.
As far as the hearing today, this is what's going to happen. Mr. Rothmurrow, who is the Assistant Attorney General who is present, is going to be questioning you. He's going to question you regarding your offense and your prior criminal record. I may have some questions in those areas also. After completing the questioning and regarding your time in prison, then we'll talk a little bit about your parole plan. After we conclude those questions of you, that's going to conclude the state of this public hearing. I'm going to open it up to anyone from the public who wishes to speak on your behalf or in opposition to your parole. After we complete the public comment, we'll go into what we call the third stage of the hearing. I'm going to give you the opportunity to make a final statement to the parole board. Mr. Rothmurrow will make a final statement as well. And I will make some comments and explain again where we're going. Now, do you have any questions as to how the hearing is going to be conducted?
No, I do not.
All right. I'll turn it over to Mr. Rothmurrow. Mr. Koster, I'm going to give you the chance to make an opening statement as to why you think or why you would like a parole.
I would like to explain to the board that I do not pose a public safety issue in any way. I have no desires whatsoever to commit any type of crimes. I just want to, be free. I've served almost 50 years and I'm so sick of prison you would not believe it. That's about what I have to say. I want to be a productive citizen and, contribute to society and everything in every way. But, I'm surprised that I got this far, to be honest with you, Mr. Egan.
Well, as you're going to be told, public hearings are not. They're rare. Not everyone gets one. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rothmurrow.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Koster.
Good morning.
My name is Scott Rothmurrow, and I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Michigan Department of Attorney General. A few things, sir. First and foremost, I'm not a prosecutor, okay? You have already pled guilty to this crime some 45 plus years ago. I'm here today to represent the people of the state of Michigan and to assist the parole board by questioning you today. My interest in asking you questions is to try to help determine the level of threat you may pose to society. I don't just mean a physical threat to the people of the state of Michigan. Now you are seeking a parole for your life sentence for second-degree murder, and you've served over 45 years from the date of your sentence. I know it would be more with your time served. I'm going to do you a favor right now, Mr. Koster, and that is this. Tell us the truth here today. First and foremost, you're sworn to tell the truth. And secondly, you're not going to do yourself any favors, especially at this stage of the process, by lying, by bending the truth, or omitting information on purpose. This is your public hearing, and it's your time to come clean about anything and everything we ask. As Mr. Egan just stated, public hearings like this are a rare opportunity, and I assume you know that. Is that correct, sir?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Egan just allowed you to make a public statement as to why you think you're ready for parole. I just have a quick follow-up question. You said you're sick of prison, right? You've done almost 50 years and you're sick of being in prison, correct?
Yes.
You, along with your co-defendant, killed 3 women, correct?
Yes.
I mean, we're going to get to that, but I understand you were 15 at the time, and we're going to talk about you and your co-defendant's relationship and everything, but I guess I was just taken aback a little bit by your saying you're sick of prison. Well, there's 3 women that are dead because of you and your co-defendant.
I realize that.
Do you have anything to say that as far as your comment and how it relates to the 3 women being dead?
I deserve to spend the rest of my time in prison. There's no doubt about that. But I would like to be given the opportunity to serve the rest of my remaining days in a free community rather than die in prison. I realize what I did. I realize that it was horribly wrong. But there are circumstances that got me involved in this, and one of them is, I know it's rare form to blame the co-defendant, but I was, shall we say, under the influence. I know what I did. I accept responsibility for that. But if it were not for my co-defendant, I would not be sitting here.
I appreciate that. I wanted to maybe challenge you a little bit on that because it kind of came off as glib. Because every person, everybody in there is sick of prison.
I understand.
To hear that comment and not to follow up with anything about remorse or even a mention of your victims kind of struck me as a little glib. So with that being said, we will move forward. I want to put some dates and some names on the record. This crime occurred, or the crimes occurred regarding your first 2 victims, occurred on July 6th, 1972. You were sentenced 3 years later on July 21st, 1975. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
You were 15 at the time of the first 2 murders, and your co-defendant is Danny Rains. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you are.
I always like to identify victims on the record for matters, especially in times like this, where we have no one apparently in the hearing today that is going to testify in their behalf. Sir, do you know the names of your first 2 victims from July 6th, 1972 incident?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
Claudia Bidstrip and Linda Clark.
Thank you. Then there was another woman that was killed on August 5th, 1972. What was her name, sir?
Pamela Fearnow.
Thank you.
I want to say something. I'm nervous here. The anxiety level is off the chart, so if I come across a little, short, please understand that.
I've done hundreds of these, and I won't take any type of response as anything like you've portrayed, so don't worry about it. Take a deep breath. You don't look nervous, but I'm sure you are. This has been a long time coming. You've been down for over 45 years, and then even more with your time served. We'll get to all that because I know you testified against Mr. Rains, and we'll talk about all that. So we've got as much time as necessary. So take a deep breath and let me tell you how my questioning is going to go and what I'm going to talk about. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the murders of the 3 women, but we're going to start off just going back to 1972, Mr. Koster. It was summer. You were not in school. We're going to talk about what was going on. Normally, I would say, where were you living or working? But we'll talk a little bit about your family situation back then. We will talk about what you were doing. Then we're going to talk about you and Mr. Rains because obviously in your situation, I recognize that from having read and prepared for this hearing, I recognize that he obviously had some sway over you, and you just indicated that as such at the beginning of this hearing. We're going to talk about your relationship, and then we're going to talk about the crimes. We're going to talk about the kidnapping and the rapes and the murders of these women. We're going to talk about what happened after, and then we're going to talk about you testifying. And to your credit, you testified, and your testimony led to the conviction of Mr. Rains, correct?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that. I'm sure some other questions will come up, but that's going to be the framework of my questioning. You're not on trial again, but my role here is to try to walk you through what happened back at the time of the crime and for you to give truthful, honest, and complete answers. So the more you fill in, the better, okay? If there are details or if there's things that I don't ask you about, when there's details that you think are important, that you want Mr. Egan and the parole board to know, by all means, you can interrupt me. If I move to another topic, or I move on to the next time frame, or whatever happened next, and you want to fill in more, I'm not going to take offense, okay? This is your public hearing, and it's important for you to get all the information out to the parole board. Do you have any questions for me? Does this make sense? And do you understand?
Yes, I understand.
So with that being said, let's go back to 1972. You were 15 years old. I understand you dropped out of school, but you were, so this is the summer of 72. Had you already dropped out, or were you tell me, what's going on in 1972 in your life? Summer of 72.
In 1972, I was jumping from neighborhood to neighborhood, making friends, and I ended up on the East Main side of town, and that's where I met a friend. And his mother had met Mr. Rains, and she became romantically involved with him, and she brought him home, and that's where I was introduced.
So it was, just so I'm clear, I read this, but the friend, you became friends with someone, and his mother was dating Danny Rains?
Yes.
As far as your family situation, you were a runaway at this time in the summer of 72?
Yes, I was. How far do you want me to go back? I mean, I can start. Where do you want me to start?
Well, I understand. I appreciate that question. I guess a thumbnail sketch. I understand your family situation was rather chaotic. Your mother was a paranoid schizophrenic. Your father was an alcoholic. I'll leave it to you. I mean, as far as what you think is important for the parole board to know, because they already know that.
What I need to do is really get out there, is that I had a tremendous need to be accepted because of my dysfunctional home environment, and that was largely attributed to my mother. My mother had mental issues and was diagnosed basically as acute paranoid schizophrenia, and everybody in the neighborhood, kids knew, we all had information, we all knew that my mom was crazy, and it was embarrassing, shameful and whatnot, and I'm literally jumping around from neighborhood to neighborhood. I jumped from neighborhood to Parchment School District, I jumped to Barclay Hills, I jumped to East Main, I jumped to Millwood, jumped there to Portage, and all over the place. I was trying to make friends left and right. It was in East Main area where I met a friend who I just explained, and that's where I met Danny Rains.
And when was that?
May or June of 1972.
Okay. So you hadn't known Mr. Rains for very long when these murders and rapes occurred.
No, if I may, he broke up with my friend's mother, and he started dating another woman not too far from there. And I started living with him and his new girlfriend in the trailer park. I helped him out at work and whatnot, and that's when he started talking about the crimes.
And he was 28 at the time, so he was significantly older. He was an adult, and you started at the time when you met him in May or June of 72. You're a runaway from home, and you're just staying with friends? I mean, are you staying where you can?
Yes.
And you had already dropped out of school at that point, or had you finished the previous school year?
I had finished the previous school year.
Okay, so you're staying with friends, and then you end up meeting Danny Rains through your friends or through your one friend. Then you say he broke up with a girl or the friend's mother and still stayed nearby. And then you essentially just moved into Danny's trailer, or?
It was actually his girlfriend's trailer. I think it was Colonial Trailer Park. It was off Sprinkle Road.
Okay, so this all happened pretty quickly then.
Yes.
How would you describe your relationship with Danny as of, let's say, the beginning of July 72? If you've known him for a month, 6 weeks, how would you describe the relationship or the dynamic between the two of you?
Well, as a kid, I looked up to him. He impressed me as being smart. And the thing of it is, I had a craving for attention and acceptance. And I wanted to be an older person than I was, And he often talked about adventure, about all different women in the world and everything. And I wanted to hear. I wanted women. I wanted travel. I wanted adventure. I wanted the whole ball of wax. And he basically told me exactly what I wanted to hear.
And he worked at a gas station at this time, is that correct?
Yes.
And you already started to mention how you started to help him out at the gas station?
Yes, almost on a nightly basis.
All right. Were you getting paid for this or anything, or were you just doing it to impress him or to help him?
I was doing it. I was not getting paid. I was there just being a helper.
And was he running the cash register, or what was he doing?
It was the night shift. He actually ran the entire gas station.
When did you start helping him out? I mean, are we talking June or...
Well, when I moved in, I started helping him. He did not have a car or vehicle at the time, so he used his girlfriend's car to go to work, and I would just go with him. Sometimes there would be somebody there, and he would ask me, "You've got to leave until these people leave." So I would just take the car and then park across the street in the GM parking lot, or I would go somewhere and come back later.
And did you have any relationship with your father at this point in your life?
Relationship?
With your father? I'm just curious. You said you lived with your mother, but I'm just curious about your father.
My mother and father lived in the same house.
So they were together?
Yes.
It seemed you didn't mention earlier, but your father was an alcoholic according to what Mr. Shipman wrote down. Is that correct?
Yes, he was an alcoholic. He drank excessively. I remember driving him home a couple of times, and he was so drunk.
Did you suffer from any abuse as a child?
No, that I did not. I don't even remember my father hitting me once. He'd yell at me a lot, but he'd never hit me.
All right. Well, at the time that you came in contact with Donnie Raines in May or June of 1972, you had this underlying need to be accepted. When you met Danny Raines, he filled that role for you, correct?
Yes, he did. I was immature, foolish. I was 15 years old. I mean, you can remember back when you were 15, your senses weren't all that well developed.
And so you start helping Danny around the gas station. And then this must have only been for a matter of a couple or few weeks before the rape and murder of Miss Clark and Miss Bidstrup, correct? I mean, how long were you helping him out?
I think more than a couple weeks. It might have been a month. Well, yes, it wasn't a very long time.
That was my point. It wasn't very long that you were helping out Danny at the gas station. You're living with him and helping him out. And you had already started to talk about that Danny was starting to fill your head. I don't want to say fill your head. Danny was telling you about some of the crimes he wanted to commit. Is that correct?
Actually, he told me about two crimes that he had committed. One of them he went to prison for. He raped a woman, and she asked him to release her, and she wouldn't say anything. She did. He was arrested, and he was sent to prison. And he said, point blank, he says, that will never happen again.
And what was he inferring?
That there wouldn't be any witnesses to his crimes.
So he would kill a woman if that happened again?
Yes, and he did. He told me about a rape and a murder that he committed prior to meeting me. It was a lady by the name of, I can't remember, Patricia Hauk. I'm sorry, that's the lady who he killed. And I was not sure that he actually was telling me the truth or he wanted to try to impress me in some way. But he told me a lot of details about it, kind of matching up with what was in the newspaper, so I believed him at that point.
Right. And so he's telling you this, and what is your reaction? I mean, you're a 15-year-old. You've come from a horrible background as far as family life, but even so, you know right from wrong as a 15-year-old. You look up to him. He's telling you some things you want to hear. He's probably feeding you and giving you a roof to stay under, but he's telling you about some pretty heinous crimes, right?
Yes.
So can you talk about that? I mean, you just put it to me, well, remember when you were 15? Now, granted, I didn't have the family background that you did at 15, but I could know right from wrong at 15.
I was blindly following him at that point. And also, he kept bringing up the issue of sex. And when you're 15 years old, sex is very interesting. The murder part, it's hard to explain. I concentrated on the sex. I did not concentrate on the murder. And only when it actually happened, that's when it really set in. I mean, it really got to me.
So he's told you stories about previous crimes. You've been working with him, staying with him for a month or so. Any other background that you feel is important for the parole board to know before we go to July 6th, 1972, and the events surrounding the killing of Linda Clark and Claudia Bidstrup?
No.
Okay. And I guess I'll ask Mr. Egan, is there anything that you or the parole board would, because this is obviously important, any background before we go to the actual crime?
Mr. Koster, prior to the crime, were you involved in using alcohol or drugs?
I experimented a little bit with alcohol and also experimented a little bit with drugs, but it was not in excess.
What drugs did you use?
Marijuana.
How often were you using it?
Periodically, not on a regular basis.
And you said you weren't. It wasn't a problem with alcohol. How often were you drinking?
If I were to go to someone's house and they were throwing a party, I would drink. Sometimes it would be in moderation, sometimes to excess.
You indicated that you were helping your co-defendant at night working. What were you doing with your days?
When I got off at 7 o'clock, I would sleep probably until noon or whatnot. And then I befriended the girl who lived in the trailer, and we would go to places.
As far as school, when you talked about jumping from school to school, what was the last grade you attended school?
I believe it was 10th grade.
Okay. No other questions. Thank you, Mr. Rothmurl.
Thank you. So let's go to the Wednesday night, July 5th, 1972. Danny is working at the Standard Station on Sprinkle Road near 94. You go with him to work, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And take it from there. What happens that night?
That particular night, I was helping my co-defendant and two young ladies pull in asking for gas.
And this is in the middle of the night, right? Like 1 a.m. according to the PSI?
Yes, I put gas in the car, and my co-defendant popped the hood and pulled one of the spark plugs. It was a small subcompact car. I think it was a 4-cylinder. And when the driver started it up, one of the girls started it up. It didn't run. It didn't run right. My co-defendant then suggested that we pull the car into one of the bays in the service station.
Let me pause this. Had there been any discussion prior to Linda and Claudia pulling in and you and your co-defendant then servicing the car and Danny pulling a spark plug wire, was there any discussion about or planning, hey, look, if a woman comes up, we're going to do this? Did Danny ever talk to you about this beforehand?
He never talked about pulling the spark plug. He stated that, if the opportunity presents itself, we would abduct, rape, and kill a girl.
And he put that in the context of when he was describing his previous crimes? I mean, did he say he wanted to do this again, or how did that come up?
After he had told me about his crime that he had committed before meeting me, he said that he wanted to do it again.
And then at some point just said he and you could do this at the gas station?
Well, yeah, if that opportunity presented itself, there was if someone pulled in and the opportunity looked right, he said he would do it, or we would do it.
And you told him you would be on board?
Yes.
And so Linda and Claudia pull up. You fill up the gas. You fill up the gas tank, and Danny goes under the hood, pulls one of the spark plug wires. And so now the car is, when they go to leave, the car is, I guess it wasn't misfiring. The engine wouldn't sound right. And when that happens, you said that Danny suggested they pull the car into the garage at the gas station. Is that correct?
Yes. Danny tried to explain a bunch of auto mechanics to them. I don't know what he was trying to say, but the girls sensed he didn't know what he was talking about, so they said, we're going to leave and try to get it fixed someplace else. When they got in the car, my co-defendant was on the driver's side and I was on the passenger side. He withdrew a knife, and when he did that, so did I.
So why were you carrying a knife?
We both were. It It was just something that we didn't have any guns or anything like that. These were the only weapons that were available.
What kind of knife was it?
A kitchen knife. The one that I had was a kitchen knife.
Did you know Danny pulled the spark plug wire?
He indicated that he did after.
After he did that, he told you what was going down or what he had done to sabotage the engine?
The girls, well, he actually approached the girls and says, it's not running right. He indicated that he would pull it into the van, that he'll take a look at it.
But at some point, did he pull you aside and say what he had done to clue you in?
I don't recall, to be honest with you. I don't think he did.
So as far as you were concerned, was there any planning or, well, I don't want to say planning. Was there any knowledge on your part when Danny had the girls pull their car into the garage or the service bay at the gas station that this was going to be your guys' opportunity as far as victims?
I got the sense that that was the case.
And how did you get that sense?
Well, he pulled the spark plug wire for a reason, and asked them to pull the car into the bay of the gas station. And that's a pretty good indicator that this was something that he wanted to do.
Oh, I guess I'm confused then. I didn't know that you knew that he pulled the spark plug wire.
No, what I'm saying is he did pull it, and by doing so, it indicated that it was the type of opportunity that he was looking for. Why would he pull the spark plug wire if he didn't want to do anything?
No. There's a miscommunication here. I understand that's why he did it, and obviously that set the wheels in motion. I was just curious about your perception. You said you didn't know he had pulled the spark plug wire, and I was just curious because then he pulled a knife and you pulled your knife. So I was just wondering where, from your point of view, when you knew this was a ruse and that you guys were going to be, going after these women. That's what I'm looking for.
When he pulled his knife, that was basically a cue that it was going to happen.
Okay. So you didn't know what he had done until when he pulled that knife. That was kind of your cue. And okay, now this is going to be at least a rape, and you're going to go after these girls. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So he pulls his knife, you pull yours. What happens next? Are the girls still in the car, or what's going on?
They were asked to get in the back seat.
By who?
My co-defendant. I had initially pulled the bay door down, so I pulled it back up so that he could back the car up. I got in the passenger seat, he was driving, and the car was pulled around the back to the service station.
Okay. And the girls, they abided and got in the back seat of the car?
Yes, they did.
And so Danny drives the car around to the back of the service station. What happens next?
The girls were put in a van that my co-defendant owned in the back of the service station. It was a Corvair van. It was an old one.
Okay. And what was the point of putting them in the van?
That's where they would be raped.
Okay. And is that when the rape happened?
Yes, it did.
Who raped first and who? Can you just give us more details as to what happened then?
The girls were placed in the van, and my co-defendant told me to go watch the service station.
Did you? You both have your knives out still. Your knives out?
I don't recall after that. I don't know if I had in the side of my pants pocket. I don't remember where I put it after that.
But had Linda and Claudia seen the knives beforehand?
Oh, yeah, when they were pulled.
Right. So they knew you guys were armed and they were listening to you guys' instructions. So did you assist in putting the girls into the van or ordering them into the van? I guess I should say.
I think I helped them into the van, but I don't precisely recall how. I think I did. There was a styrofoam mattress in there and everything, and that was why they were put in the van.
But I mean, even actually by your mere presence, you were assisting Danny and they knew you were armed, and so they get in the van. And then Danny tells you to go back and watch the service station in case customers came up, right?
Yes.
And how long were you back watching the station?
I don't recall how long it was, but I actually went back to the van and opened the door.
What'd you see?
My co-defendant was engaged in sex with one of the girls.
Well, we're going to call it rape. It's not consensual sex.
Agreed.
So both Linda and Claudia are in the van, and he is raping one of the two women?
Yes.
And what do you do when you see this? What happens next?
I closed the door and went back to the front of the station.
What happens next?
He came around to the station, and I can't remember his exact language, but he says, go ahead, and I went into the van and I raped Linda.
What happened next?
He came around with a car, and one of the ladies were put in the back seat of a car. His girlfriend's car, and the other girl was put in the back seat of their car, and that's when my co-defendant indicated that I should do the killing.
Killing of whom?
Claudia at first.
And so which vehicle was Claudia in? Their own car or Danny's girlfriend's car?
I believe it was in the girlfriend's car. It's been a long time. That's damn near 50 years ago.
I know. I understand. But I'm just trying to walk through this. Why were the girls put in separate cars?
Well, so they could be murdered. He indicated there's a phrase to be used. I need to taste the medicine of what it's like to kill. And he wanted me to do the killing. I climbed in the back seat with Claudia, and he had some rope that I got from him. I put it around her neck and tried to strangle her. I didn't do a very good job. He came back and checked on me, and Claudia was still alive.
Was she fighting when you were strangling her?
A little bit.
What do you mean a little bit? She's being strangled. Has she been raped, by the way, as well as Claudia?
I did not.
Do you know if Danny Raines raped her?
I don't know if he did or not.
Well, she's now fighting for her life in the backseat of a car at a gas station at 2 a.m. What did she do when you put the rope around her?
She bounced back towards the back seat when I was trying to strangle her. But when the co-defendant found out that she was still alive, he grabbed one end of the rope and told me to grab the other end. And he almost yelled at me. He says, pull. And that's when she died.
That's when you guys murdered her, to put it in the proper tense.
Okay.
You've talked about this beforehand, but just for the record. So you said earlier that the idea of rape and sex intrigued you as a 15-year-old boy, correct?
Yes.
But the idea of murder, that didn't really cross your mind? Is that correct?
Well, it crossed my mind, but it didn't become, how can I say this, a reality to me until it actually happened.
So at that point, when Danny tells you to go kill, you probably didn't even know her name, but who turned out to be Claudia in the backseat of the car, tells you to taste the medicine. Is that the phrase he used to you?
Yes, I want to make sure I got this right. The taste of medicine.
Okay. So when Danny told you you needed to get a taste of the medicine, you knew what that was? That you knew that he was telling you that you needed to kill her, correct?
Yes.
What was going through your mind when you heard that? When you heard him tell you that, what was your reaction? I mean, obviously, you went and did it, but...
I was hesitant, but I'm knee deep into this crime. I probably should have got out of there right then and there, but I didn't.
Why didn't you?
He basically directing the whole show here and telling me to do it, and I did it.
All right, so you choke her with a rope, but at some point, well... You said that Danny came over and you guys he realized she wasn't dead. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, did you choke her to the point where she lost consciousness but wasn't dead? I guess, can you just explain that a little bit better?
He checked for her pulse and she wasn't dead. Apparently she'd blacked out.
So you strangled her to at least to unconsciousness.
I thought she was dead, but she was not.
All right. So then he checked, he found a pulse, and at that point, the two of you, did you reapply the rope and the two of you then both pulled the sides?
Yes.
And you strangled her and what? Did he check her pulse again? I mean, how did you guys know that she was dead this time?
Well, the amount of pressure that was being applied, I doubt very seriously if she survived it. I mean, she died.
And this was in the back seat of, you think, Danny's girlfriend's car is where the first murder occurred?
Yes.
Was this in the back of the service station?
Yes, it was.
So now, Claudia Bidstrup has been murdered, and Linda Clark is in the back seat of her, well, I don't know if it's hers or I don't know whose car it was, but it was their own car, and she's just staying in there? Probably ordered by you or Danny to stay in this vehicle?
Right.
What happens next?
I got into the car and I put some rope around her neck and I applied enough pressure where she would die.
And did you do this at the direction of Danny after the first murder?
Yes, yes.
So you then kill, and why are you doing this as opposed to Danny?
He wanted me to, like I told you.
Yeah, the taste of medicine. I get it. But at no point did you resist or tell him no? Why don't you just do the second woman? I've killed one. There's no hesitation on your part?
No.
All right. So then you strangle and kill Linda Clark. What happens next? Now you've got two women's bodies and two vehicles at the gas station.
Claudia was then moved to their car and placed in the back seat. My co-defendant came up with a blanket from somewhere. I don't know where he got it. And the blanket was put over the top of the two girls in the back seat.
Mr. Egan?
I have a couple of questions, Koster. I'm having a little bit of a hard time understanding when you went to the van the first time. After you had been directed to watch the gas station, you went back. You said you opened the door and you saw that Mr. Raines was raping one of the women. Is that correct?
Yes.
Where was the other woman?
Laying right beside him.
Was she restrained in any way?
She had rope tied behind her back.
So her hands were tied behind her back.
Yes.
And were her feet also tied?
I don't recall the feet being tied.
Okay. And then when these two women were directed or put into the two different vehicles then, they were still restrained? Is that right?
Yes.
So they weren't really able to go for help?
No.
And when you said you raped Linda, is that correct?
Yes.
Where was Claudia at that time?
She was laying right beside me.
All right. That's what I wanted to clarify. I wanted to understand why they didn't get away, so they were restrained. Okay, thank you.
Who did the restraining, Mr. Koster?
I don't really recall. I might have, but I don't recall who actually put the rope on the girls.
I'm sorry. Mr. Rothmer, one other question. Mr. Rothmer was asking you a question about the discussion of you doing the murders. Was there any discussion that of your age that you were a juvenile versus him being an adult and committing these offenses?
I don't quite understand.
Well, as a juvenile, you would be under the jurisdiction of a probate court, the juvenile court. Was there any discussion that you would get a lighter sentence or your culpability wouldn't have been the same as his because he's an adult? You're still a juvenile.
There was no discussion like that.
Thank you. Mr. Rothmerl?
When you raped Miss Clark, did you ejaculate?
Yes.
So let's move forward. You have two dead bodies in the back of their own car. Is there a discussion between you and Danny as far as what you're going to do next?
He came up with a gallon jug of gas, and he said that I should set the car on fire. He put it in the car, and I drove off. Now, the PSI says that he shut down the station, and we both did. It was a service station that was open 24 hours a day. And I left, and I drove aimlessly and ended up finding a wooded area where I drove into and parked the car.
Okay, and was he following you?
Who?
Danny. So you're driving the girl's car with the two dead bodies in the back seat, correct?
Yes.
And he had said that you should go and burn the car.
Yes.
And you drove aimlessly, but how are you going to get back? I mean, was there any plan? I mean, he stayed at the gas station.
Yes.
He sent you off to take care of the car and the bodies on your own.
Yes.
Go ahead. What happened next? You drove aimlessly. You ended up in a wooded area. Do you have any idea where?
Later on, I did. I was near Galesburg in Michigan.
Okay. So you would have went east. You would have probably got on 94 or something.
No, it was down Sprinkle Road, and I turned right and turned another right, and that's where I ended up. It was by I-94.
Right. Okay. So you ended up near Galesburg. What do you do with the car and the bodies?
I drove the car into a wooded area. I poured gas all over the car. I had a cigarette that I had lit. I put into a book of matches, hoping it would burn down and ignite and set the car on fire. And then I left.
And you didn't wait to see if the car actually caught fire?
I thought it did, but it did not.
Where did you go?
I went along. There was a river there. I went along the river and came up into a property of some other place, and then I made my way out to the highway, and I hitchhiked into town.
And where did you go next?
Well, I called my co-defendant, and he came and picked me up.
And I think, was he back at the girlfriend's? That's what I think I read in the PSI, that you had called at his girlfriend's house or trailer?
Yes.
So now we're into are we in through the night or?
Well, actually, the morning.
Well, yeah, I guess it would be the early morning hours of that day. So Danny came and picked you up. Did he question you about what happened and how you disposed of the car and bodies?
I remember a conversation, but to be honest, I don't remember the specifics of the conversation.
All right. And so what happened next then as far as the events of that day and the murders of Linda Clark and Claudia Bidstrup? Is there anything left to tell as far as their story? Such as it is?
No.
Okay. The car did not burn, and the murder victims were discovered considerably later by a person riding a motorcycle in the area who contacted the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department, and they started an investigation. So that's the murders of Linda and Claudia on July 6th, 1972. Then a whole month goes by before the next crime. What are you guys doing for the next month, or what are you doing? And well, yeah, what are both of you guys doing?
Working at night.
At the gas station?
Yes. and someone had parked a van, or not a van, but a makeshift trailer across the street in the GM parking lot. Come to find out, it was the surveillance trailer. They were actually surveilling the service station because they had found Claudia and Linda and Rains had just been released from prison for rape, and I think they were trying to catch him in the act of a second murder. We were just, well, why I say that is because it was a routine thing going on to work, getting off. During the day, I would, like I said, I had befriended the daughter, and we would go to places.
Which daughter?
The lady's daughter in the trailer park.
So Danny's girlfriend had a daughter?
Yes.
Was she your age? Younger? Older?
Marianne, she was about a year older than I was.
Okay, so you're doing things with her. Was there any discussion after the rape and murder and disposal of bodies of Linda and Claudia? Was there any discussion between you and Danny as far as, hey, we got away with it, let's do it again? Because you guys just committed a horrible act, and I don't know, I'm just wondering if there's any discussion between the two of you over the next month about what had happened.
Well, everything was normal. And then he wanted to go for a ride in his new van, and we ended up by Western Michigan University campus. And a lot of the students were hitchhiking, and we picked up one girl who was hitchhiking. We made an agreement that if we saw someone, we would make a decision as to whether we both wanted to do it.
Again?
Again. And the first person that we picked up, I said no. I shook my head no.
And why did you shake your head no?
I just didn't want to do it, and he was quite mad about it. He was very quiet. He didn't say anything, and he saw another girl that was hitchhiking. He didn't ask that time whether we should do it or not.
What made you shake your head no to the first girl?
I didn't want to do it.
I know, but did you not want to participate in another rape and robbery, period? Or was there something about this girl? They are two different things.
Period. I didn't want to get involved again. I was trying to figure out a way to get out of there instead of just running straight to the police, being charged down and then thrown in juvenile hall, or taken off on my own and raising suspicion of having him come after me. I was just biding my time trying to figure out a way to get out of there.
Did you have a reason to fear for your safety, or did that...
Well, back when Claudia was murdered, and he grabbed the end of that rope, and I grabbed the other end of the rope, he had a look on his face that really scared me. And at that point, I thought, I got to get away from this. I mean, I hung out with him. Nothing was happening. Everything was all right until that day that he wanted to go riding around and ended up at Western Michigan University campus.
Did you give any thought over that month? Because that's a long time. There's a month between the two crimes. Did you give any thought as to leaving the situation?
Yes, I told you that.
I know. Fair enough. You did tell me. But you feared him enough that you stayed, I guess?
I didn't want to end up being killed, so I did not want to raise any suspicion as to I wanted to get out of there. As a matter of fact, in the end, I asked Fran, his girlfriend, whether I should be going back to school. She agreed and said, I don't know how he's going to take it. She talked to him, and he came to me and said that I should be going back to school. And I got basically I got out of there at that point.
When was that? That was prior to... That wasn't prior to the van and people.
No, that was afterwards.
All right, so let's continue on. You guys picked up one hitchhiker, and you shook your head no, and he agreed, and you guys just dropped her off?
Yes.
All right, but then you picked up Pamela Fearnow?
Yes.
What happens next? This is the same night?
This is the same day.
Same day. Second hitchhiker?
Yes.
Miss Fearnow.
She wanted to go to Westland Mall, and my co-defendant drove out to Westland Mall, and in the parking lot, she started to get out, and he popped the clutch where she couldn't get out, and he drove a little bit farther, and she got back on the motor hood and in the van and stopped again. And that's when he drew a knife and put it to her neck and said, don't scream, and you won't get hurt.
And so this was the afternoon of August 5th? It was daylight? Is what I'm getting at.
It was daylight. I'm not sure it was in the morning or in the afternoon, to be honest with you.
According to the PSI, it says the last murder occurred on August 5th, 1972 at approximately 1:30 when you guys were driving around in the van, and then you ended up picking up Pamela Fearnow. So afternoon. I guess what I'm getting at is the ultimate abduction occurs where it turns from just giving her a ride to an abduction. That occurred in the parking lot of the Westland Mall?
Yes.
Okay, and go from there. Then once he puts a knife to her, what happens next?
I got into the back of the van, placed her on the foam rubber mattress that he had in his Covair, and he drove to Comstock area where we parked.
Did you tie her up at all, like the previous girls had been tied up?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I might have, but I don't recall. I'd have to take a look at the PSI, to be honest with you.
I don't recall seeing that, but I do. You're saying that you held her at bay while he drove to Comstock?
Yes,
And did you have a knife on you as well?
I believe that I did.
What happened once you got to Comstock?
Her clothes were taken off, and she was raped by my co-defendant and I.
And what happened next?
Well, we were moved a number of times because there were people who came by and saw us and whatnot, just parked there. And then later in the afternoon, my co-defendant actually went to the store, got some alcohol, and we went back to the same wooded area.
And she's still alive at this point?
Yes.
You're just holding her essentially hostage?
Yes.
Okay. What happened next?
Well, we all drank something, had sex again.
Raped,
Excuse me. And then later on, she was tied up, and
Who tied her up?
I think I did. I'm not sure, though.
I'm reading the PSI. Hands were tied behind her back, and her feet were tied as well. Then what happened?
I put a green garbage bag over her head.
Did you put a rag in her mouth as well?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And then you put a garbage bag over her head. Go ahead.
And then I put a rope around the garbage bag so it would seal it. She ended up suffocating.
And this was done where? In the back of the van or outside?
It was in the van.
Okay. So you murdered. Did Danny help you out at all, or was this all you again?
I believe it was all me. He wanted me to do the murders. And I should have told him, kiss my ass.
What was he doing while you were tying her up, gagging and asphyxiating Pamela? What is he doing during this whole time?
Watching. He was in the van.
So what did you do with Pamela's body?
She was placed at the side of the road. And when I came back up to the van, I looked into the right, and here comes a sheriff cruiser. And I indicated to my co-defendant, cop, and then I took off running back into the woods.
And her body was just on the side of the road?
Right.
And so you took off running, and I know Danny Raines had some sort of interaction with the sheriff's deputy, but they must have not seen the body or obviously didn't see the body, and their interaction didn't result in anything. And so what happened after you went running?
I made my way up to the highway, called him at the trailer. He came and picked me up.
And what happened next? Because I know there was some further moving of the body, correct?
Yes. After we got out of work the next night, we came immediately back to the area and the body was moved.
Where did you guys move it to?
The same general vicinity, but just enough to throw off police guy that he had talked to.
All right. Mr. Egan, any questions thus far?
No, I don't have any questions.
So what happens next, Mr. Koster, as far as the arrest? What happens next as far as the story goes, such as it is? After the killing of Pamela that night, what happens next?
Well, I continued to live there until I talked to Fran, who in turn talked to my co-defendant about going back to school. I then returned home.
You went back home to your mom and father's?
Yes.
All right. And tell us about the events that led to your arrest.
I told an individual about what I had done.
Who?
A friend of mine.
A teenager?
Yes.
What did you tell them?
That I was involved in the rape and murders. He in turn told another individual who used the information as a bargaining chip when he got in trouble.
Another juvenile as well?
Yes.
So this third juvenile got in trouble, but had this secondhand knowledge about Brent Koster said this, that he was involved in this rape and murder of some women and used that. And the police then turned their eyes toward you?
Yes.
And how did that go down? Did they come to your house or what happened?
I was with a friend, and ironically, it was not planned in any way. It was just coincidence. We went to the same places that they went to. It was like almost we were following them, but we weren't.
What do you mean by they and them? Who were you talking about?
The police detectives. And they finally found the last place I was at, and they came and got me.
And you were then interviewed by sheriff's department detectives?
Yes.
And you confessed to your role in these murders?
Not initially.
What did you initially say?
I denied it at first. Through negotiations with my attorney, I entered into a plea negotiation.
Whereby you would testify in return for a murder, second-degree murder plea?
Yes.
Well, I guess I should step back. You were waived up to circuit court from juvenile division of the circuit court, probate court, correct?
Yes, it was discretionary at the time.
Yep. And so you were waived up to the circuit court. You'd have had an attorney, as you just indicated, and then obviously the prosecutor talked with your attorney, and your attorney would have talked with you, and you agreed to testify against Danny Rains ultimately. And do you know the circumstances involving his arrest, or did you give police information that led to Danny's arrest?
No, they arrested us at the same time, basically the same night.
Okay. But ultimately, then, through discussions with the prosecutor and your attorney, and then obviously your attorney and you agreed to testify against Danny Rains in a result for just a plea for second degree, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And then ultimately, you testified at Danny Rains' trial. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And did you essentially testify to what we've talked about here over the past hour and a half?
Yes.
And as I read in the PSI, it says that Rains attempted to obtain a hitman to kill the co-defendant. Do you know when that happened?
I don't know when that actually happened. I was informed of it initially by the prosecutor, and then it appeared in my PSI.
All right, so you testified at his trial. He was ultimately convicted, and I guess I'll just pause again to see if Mr. Egan has any questions.
I do want to ask just a few questions about the rapes. When you raped these women, was it acts of intercourse? Was there oral sex or anal sex? Or multiple penetration?
Just regular sex. Just regular intercourse. Vaginal.
Vaginal intercourse.
Vaginal,
okay.
Yes.
That's what I wanted to know. That's all I have.
Thank you. So, Mr. Koster, this is an important question. Can you describe, you raped and murdered 3 women. All of them had families, friends. I believe Miss Clark and Miss Bidstrup were about 20 years old each, and they were driving from Chicago and just stopped at the wrong gas station at the wrong night with you and Mr. Rains working that night. I don't know Miss Fearnow's age, but she was, well, you tell me, do you know anything about her?
She was 18.
18. Was she a student at Western, or do you know anything about her?
I believe she was a student.
So you killed, raped, and killed along with your co-defendant 3 young women who no doubt had families, friends. Can you describe the impact you had on these victims' families and their friends?
It must have been horrible, I know that. I can't even begin to realize the pain and suffering that they all went through. The only thing I can compare it to is when I lost my father and my mother and the pain that I went through. But I can imagine that it would be nowhere compared to what the families went through. Over the years, I've talked to a couple of people who have lost a child, and they said that there's no greater pain than to lose a child. And I can only imagine the loss that they felt and hatred towards me.
I think we all need a break because that was really heavy, really heavy.
But before we leave you, I have a few things to say.
I know you do.
Okay, first off, Toddy, I love that you said vaginal.
Vaginal, right?
Love it. That was too much. But can I just point out how this Mr. Koster literally needed to be reminded several times that it was not sex. They didn't have sex.
Right.
They raped them.
Mm-hmm.
And the district attorney, is that who you're reading, Rothermere?
Yes.
He's the district attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So he had to remind him several times, no rape, no, it was rape, no, it was murder. So on one hand, I want to feel for the kid, because the nurse in me wants to just make the little kids feel better all the time, and oh, poor you, and you had a rough childhood. But he didn't really have a rough childhood because he had a mom and a dad that lived at home, and he ran away. So he was kind of a bad apple from the word go, first off. And then secondly, he's hanging out with a really bad crowd. He's crashing on the couches of other people that live in trailers in bad neighborhood trailer parks. And he's all about the sex, the vaginal sex.
The vaginal sex.
Nothing's better than the vaginal sex.
Just regular vaginal.
But I digress.
I think we all did.
Hey, I just made up a new word.
From this guy, you know what I mean? Like, on one hand, we're like, okay, he fell in with the wrong crowd type of people, and this is a perfect, I don't know, billboard for those that say, show me your friends, I'll show you your future, or any of those idioms that go along those routes. You know, when you hang around with a bad crowd, you're going to get into bad things. But at the same time, he was kind of all for it for a while.
Yeah.
And I really feel like this, I just wanted to get out of there. I feel like that's being sorry for it after the fact. That's only sorry because you got caught. You're only saying that you wanted to get out of there, but I don't know. I think the guy that I was reading, the judge, I guess I'm reading for the judge, I feel like he was really on the money when he said, are you sure you didn't talk about juvenile records and juveniles getting shorter sentences? Because that seemingly is exactly what was happening.
Yep, I agree. And if he wasn't so into it, why a month later were they both packing knives and in a van cruising to pick up hitchhikers to rape and kill?
Yeah, and lo and behold, 2 of these 3 murders were done by Koster's hands. So no matter how you shake it, he's just as evil and guilty as the guy that's still doing life in jail.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah, I don't buy it.
But even half of it, because in the next part, we find out that this guy's like out on the street doing the car thing, right?
Well, what we're going to do, basically, I mean, we kind of laid that out there that's why Facebook people were like losing their mind and warning everybody as much as they could. What we're going to finish up with is the rest of the parole board hearing. And then there's some women, believe it or not, who are going to read their letters of support in order for him to hopefully get paroled.
Okay, are these women like, prison wives or something? Are they the women that make pen pals with the prisoners and get to know what good human beings they are while they're locked behind bars because they're animals?
These are actually, believe it or not, these are women that worked at the jail, at the prison.
Oh, God.
Yep. They have a long-standing relationship because he's been in there for a long time.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, right. Just like when we talked about Christopher Dankovich, he's in a safe place. Oh, he's doing all this and that, and he's learning this, and he's making that. But that's in a protective area. It's not out on the streets. It's not out in society.
Yeah. It's just like I live in Florida. We never talk about that because I know all of this is about Michigan and I'm just the bestie that lives in Florida. And we get on the phone and we talk about all this horrible stuff because my bestie's into all this. Okay. But that all being said, I live in Florida near Gatorland Zoo. And that's like somebody saying we should just release the gators because they've been there too long because they're so nice and they eat the chicken so nicely. We should just put them in everybody's pools. This is exactly what this is like.
They'll be fine. They're just going to be alligators.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But that's what this is.
Yeah.
Bananas.
Bananas. Totally bananas.
Well, wrap this one up so we can get the next one ready for the folks for the next Malice Monday.
All right. Well, listen, everyone. Thank you. I know that was, for those of you who stayed with us, that was really heavy. It was really, really heavy. The next and last part of this little series is not so brutal. So come back next Monday where we will finish season 1, episode 10, part 3, Brent Koster. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye.
See you next Monday. Bye.
Bye.